Climate change activists used hammers to smash the windows of Barclays Bank headquarters this morning in Canary Wharf. 7 women from Extinction Rebellion were arrested after police say they used tools to cause damage and then plastered walls with slogans. Protesters had gathered outside Barclays in Churchill Place as part of its money rebellion against the capitalist system. In a moment, Dale Vince, who's the chairman of Forest Green Rovers. Dale is not only an entrepreneur, but also an environmentalist himself. But Gail Bradbrook, to start with, Extinction Rebellion spokesperson. Gail, good afternoon to you. Obvious question to start with. What is the point in smashing up tens of thousands of pounds worth of windows of a bank?
Well, it gets you on TalkRadio, doesn't it?
Well, there is that. But is that you want to be on for the right reasons, don't you? Not the wrong reasons.
Well, what we want is to make sure that there's a conversation happening about the role of the banks in the climate emergency. We actually made a mistake in one of our press releases because we said that Barclays had invested 118 billion since the Paris Climate Agreement in fossil fuels and destructive projects, but it's actually turns out to be 145 billion. They're announcing that they're Paris aligned, and yet last year alone they put another 28 billion into fossil fuels. Barclays Bank are committing crimes against humanity, and we think cracking windows in a safe way is a proportionate response here.
They might just, they might have a different view to you on investments and what they do. I'm sure if they were here to respond to that, they would give another answer. But in terms of smashing up windows, I mean, what is achieved by that? Because you almost play into the very capitalist system you're partly against, don't you? I mean, insurance premiums go up. It's going to cost money. The money is passed on to consumers. So the whole cogwheel of commerce continues to turn as a result of the 7 women who smashed up the windows. And looking at the size of those windows, that's probably 100 grand's worth of damage.
I mean, I think what's important is to look into the history books at how change has happened. So you got the vote in because the Chartists broke windows, and Emmeline Pankhurst and other suffragettes decided to follow suit and had a window breaking campaign across London and secured the vote that way. It's largely accepted that their actions are what enabled women to get the vote after almost 100 years.
But that's because there was half the population and many of the lower social economic male population as well couldn't vote, so there was an obvious campaign there. Whereas
quite right, and what Barclays Bank is saying is that their investments are aligned with Paris, but since the Paris Agreement was signed, the whole banking system, and Barclays in the top 7 of criminals for this, have put 3.7 trillion into new fossil fuels. And now we've broken the Paris Agreement because a recent paper from Nature Climate Change this January says we're going to, no matter what we do, heat the planet to 2 degrees of warming. 2 degrees of warming, when Paris said we should stick to 1.5, means that entire countries are going to go under, that cities are going to flood, that people are going to die. There was an MOD report saying that we're heading for a perfect storm of food shortages and water shortages, and there will be wars across the world. What we're talking about are crimes against humanity, where the banks are funding destruction.
But I guess
funding the destruction of the Amazon rainforest, which has seen a toll of the earth.
All right. Well, I guess the question that still sits, it gives a bad taste to some, is the method of highlighting that. Let's speak with Dale Vince. Dale is an entrepreneur. He's the chairman of Forest Green Rovers. He's an environmentalist, and perhaps but one with a slightly different view, Dale. Would that be reasonable? Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Ian. Yeah, it's always reasonable to say that about me. I have a slightly different view. Look, I'm a fan of XR. I love what they've done. I love what they've brought to this debate. Even the basic terminology of climate crisis instead of climate change, I think we've got them to thank for that. Even our government uses it now. Guardian uses it, everybody uses it. That's great. They brought people onto the streets that never were before protesting and on the streets. And I love those mass movements that they've created. But this I'm not sure about. This is a bit violent for my liking. It's aggressive. There are a lot of people in the world that are responsible for the climate crisis, a lot of businesses, a lot of people. We can't just go around smashing the windows. I don't think this is the right thing to do. I think it's likely to do more harm to the cause than it does good.
Gail, I mean, this is from somebody who supports your organisation, who has flags for your organisation outside his own headquarters. I mean, that's a damning response there, isn't it? You haven't got everybody on side on this. What would you say to Dale?
Opinion, he's a businessman and he's in my hometown. My son's played for his football team. I like what he could do, and he's not running a social movement. He's not trying to support social change in the same way. And as I said to you, what we're basing this is on the history books. Perhaps these two guys here that are critiquing me today would also critique the suffragettes. They were heavily criticised at the time. In fact, here's a picture of anti-suffragette propaganda. It was making out that any woman that was a suffragette was leaving men to suffer. And here's another where they said this is what should happen to suffragettes, violence. And in fact, they started their window smashing after they were raped and beaten up and tortured by the UK government and by the police force. So, we are following a noble tradition, as Emmeline Pankhurst talked about, the noble art of window smashing. We're not here to be popular. We're here to open the space for a conversation. And in particular, what we're wanting to say, and what we really want banks like Barclays to say, and other business leaders like Dale, is that the current political economy that we have actually incentivizes harm. So, Barclays Bank themselves, and this is certainly no attack on the staff, by the way, and we do have, if you look in our press release, an option for people to come and sit with us and do a reflection circle on how they feel. We've had a statement from our
What's a reflection circle? And does it have to be a circle?
Well, I mean, it's a bit of hippie language there for you, I guess, but it's
that's why I asked. I just wanted. I mean, just can I just get a word back from Dale on this? Dale, I mean, you heard what Gail has said there, that these methods and techniques have been used with great effect in the past.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. And look, I also want to challenge the claim that I'm a businessman. I'm not. I'm an environmentalist, and I've been working on these issues for 30 years. I built my first windmill in the early 90s. I've been campaigning on energy, transport and food, and I am trying to bring about social change and social justice and a more sustainable country. So I don't want to be pigeonholed as a business leader. That's not correct. I think I'm all about protest, absolutely, but I just don't think this is the right way to go about it. And, Gail and I, we shared a platform a couple of years ago at WOMAD, and Gail surprised me by saying that she thought we could eat animals and solve the climate crisis. And I'm a passionate believer in animal rights and that it's wrong what we do to animals for food. So I wanted to ask Gail, actually, how would she feel if I'd gone around her house after that event and smashed the windows?
Yeah, how does that work, Gail, if Dale comes and puts your windows in?
Well, it may well happen. As I said, people who've done social change protests in the past have been subject to violent abuse, and I hope you're not in any way trying to encourage that, Dale.
No, but you're saying smashing windows is okay.
I'm not saying smashing any and every window's okay. It needs to be targeted in the right way. Just
people you decide you don't like.
Well, I've not personally invested 145 billion in fossil fuels, and
but you're part of the meat-eating industry, which is part of the problem that we have in terms of climate. I thought was the argument from organisations like Extinction Rebellion. I mean, some would say that's right up there as one of the main issues that needs to be addressed.
Well, it's interesting because what Dale's arguing is that we need to be sort of widely appealing, and at the same time that we need to sort of say you have to be vegan. And what we're trying to say is that we're a broad church and people are welcome with a variety of views. So we have XR farmers that include people who do pasture-fed livestock rearing,
but I get that. Isn't the point that you're making, Dale, that if it's about trying to get people on side, then this isn't necessarily the way that the optics of it. When you look at the kind of comments that popped up on social media, even allowing for some of the gross stuff, which nobody encourages, that's deeply unpleasant. But your point, I would imagine, Dale, is that this does nothing to expand the support for XR. In fact, there's a danger that it could, in fact, reduce support for Extinction Rebellion.
Yeah, obviously this wins headlines, as Gail said at the outset. That's been achieved, but I don't think it wins hearts and minds, and I don't think it's the right way to talk to people who you disagree with and people who you wish to get to change what they do. Barclays have got a lot to answer for, no doubt about it. The meat industry has a lot to answer for, also no doubt about it. And I don't think it's right to say Barclays has spent 100 billion, therefore I can smash their windows, but I'm just an individual that eats animals and you should leave me alone. I'm not saying anybody should smash anybody's windows, by the way, and definitely not Gail's. But what I'm saying is our individual actions, they all count for something. We can't just point the finger at big companies and say, you're doing bad stuff. We've got to look at ourselves. And if we eat animals, then we're driving the climate crisis, and we need to stop that.
All right.
Just pointing that out.
Listen, thank you to you both. We could go on for much longer. Dale Vince, who's the entrepreneur and chairman of Forest Green Rovers. Gail Bradbrook, Extinction Rebellion founder and spokesperson, with us here on Talk Radio. What do you make of both of those views? They both sing from a similar hymn sheet, but wildly disagree on the methods that should be used to advance the point.